Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. Today I'm going to be talking about what the key ingredients are to have an effective state broadband office or broadband program. I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here at Zcorum. So with all of the money that is currently flowing from the federal government, from programs like ARPA, for example, which is ongoing right now. And then you've got money that's going to be, a lot of money that's going to be flowing as early as late this next year, maybe early next year, more likely, but from the Biden infrastructure bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, lots of broadband money there. All of that money for ARPA, let's say, and for the IIJA is going to be going to the states. Those are the eligible entities that are identified in those bills. And those entities then need to look at their community to see where broadband needs are, and then also work with other stakeholders like local communities, internet service providers, to determine how those broadband funds are going to be deployed, how they're going to be best used. There's a lot needs to go on there. So therefore, the development of a good broadband program for the state and a broadband office to manage all of this is very, very important. So I was going to talk about that today because there's a document that has come out from PEW Charitable Trusts, and I will go ahead and link to this at the end of the broadcast. So I thought I'd go through this real quick, just some of the things that they've identified in here. So again, you see three components that define effective state broadband programs: dedicated offices, planning and technical assistance. Competitive grant programs are essential to expanding high-speed internet access, and that's our goal, right, is to get broadband and high-speed internet access in places where it's been difficult to get to for various reasons. High-cost areas generally, that could mean it's low income, or could mean just places that are hard to reach, not very profitable for service providers. So that's what these funds are for, to help overcome that. So here's the overview. It says states throughout the country have created programs to expand broadband connectivity for their residents, and although the configuration of these programs vary, research has indicated that the most successful ones include the same core components. So that what they're saying is they've looked at some of these broadband programs and offices that are set up, and this seems to be these common themes are what are effective. And it says a state-level broadband office with full-time staff, system to support local and regional planning and technical assistance, and well-funded competitive grant programs for internet service providers. So that full-time staff is important because, again, there's a lot of money that is coming toward the states. Some have already set up their programs and offices to some extent because they were looking at money from prior federal programs like ARPA, maybe some others, some of the coronavirus packages that came out where money was awarded to the states. So they were looking at doing that. But now everybody's really trying to get this in place because we got over almost $50 billion in broadband money just through the IIJA that's coming. And really, it's $65 billion in broadband money, but there's different programs how that's split out as far as what the states would be doing with that. So lots of money on the table, and it's really important to have a dedicated staff and office to be handling that. This is not a kind of a temp job or a part-time kind of thing, at least not for the next several years. Once these programs are in place, then you may be able to back off on some of the staff needed, but it's going to be quite an endeavor in the beginning. It mentions here competitive grant programs for internet service providers, such as telephone and cable companies, wireless internet service providers, electric cooperatives, and municipal utilities. And those are basically going to be the service providers that are going to be providing the service. So there's kind of your three main stakeholders in here. You've got your states, who are then looking to the communities that need the broadband, and then you've got, in some cases, the communities are going to be the ones that are going to be providing that on their own. In some cases, they're going to be working with a service provider like a telephone company, cable company, maybe a WISP. Could be the electric co-op in the area. Broadband office, that would be a centralized entity within the state government with a full-time focus, again, full-time focus on expanding high-speed internet access, distributing funds, planning, capacity building to support communities. The planning part's very important up front. States must provide adequate funding and a dedicated full-time staff who understand broadband issues, can manage grant administration, and can work with a wide range of affected stakeholders. So you've got several several things there that are important, going to be important to the state. That obviously understanding broadband issues, somebody needs to kind of come in with that experience of understanding broadband and what the issues are. Grant administration is important because, again, the states are going to be the ones that are going to be handling the money. They are the grantees, but the sub-grantees are going to be under the states. Those are the folks that they're going to grant money to to get this broadband out to the various communities. That could be to the community directly if they're going to do their own municipal build, for example, or it could be to these service providers. So they need to understand those issues, and the various stakeholders work with those folks that are going to be doing that. What do broadband offices contribute to efforts to expand access? Capacity within state government. So again, that's kind of that idea of a permanent state office, permanent full staff employees. So there's capacity within the state government that you wouldn't have if you didn't. It would be very hard for just various departments within the state government to manage this all on their own. It needs to be a centralized office, and that will give the capacity to the state that they need. Clear point of contact also very important, because again, if you've got all these stakeholders, if there's a service provider or a small town, that other stakeholders that need to know who to get in touch with, you need a clear point of contact. The structure, support, and authority to execute. So everything that you need to do, you need to have the authority to be able to do that. The broadband office and program can be the people that have the authority to grant the funds, to manage the funds, to make sure that people are getting the funds, are doing what they're supposed to do, and maybe any penalties if they're not, those kinds of things. A venue for building strong relationships. The relationships portion is very important between the city, between the communities, between the service providers and other stakeholders. A neutral voice. So nothing, I guess, maybe too political. When educating policymakers and community leaders, making sure that the state is a neutral voice so that they can be the arbiter of what is really needed for a community as far as broadband goes. And then coordination and partnership, building to advance broadband projects and policy. So that kind of goes along with some of these other items. Planning and technical assistance for local regional entities. Communities must first engage in a variety of planning activities, and states can support these efforts by providing, ideally, via their broadband offices, funding and technical support. So a lot of planning has to go into place from the state's perspective. The states, I believe, are supposed to have a 5-year plan. If I remember, it's the states that do that. The eligible entities have a 5-year plan that they need to come back to the NTIA. So once the notice of funding opportunity is issued by the NTIA, which is going to be sometime before mid-May of this year, the states have to get their 5-year plan in on what they're going to do with these funds. And they're going to be handling that. But they're also going to have to go to the sub-grantees that they're going to be working with and find out what their plans are. So they can provide assistance with that, as well as technical support. Planning typically happens in 2 phases, strategic and technical. Strategic planning involves defining goals, cultivating stakeholder buy-in, identifying existing assets, conducting surveys or other demand, economies of scale research, reaching out to internet service providers and examining potential models for deployment. So again, we need to figure out who doesn't have broadband, and the broadband maps that are going to be coming out before any money is going to be allocated are going to be very important, but also just going into various areas and finding out, hey, what's your internet like now? Even if supposedly they have good internet, maybe people are not satisfied. Maybe the infrastructure is not good. Maybe there's not enough capacity. Where there's areas that are considered unserved or underserved, they can survey people and find out, hey, if we bring fiber service in there, they can find out if people are really interested in that, how much they can pay, that kind of thing, kind of surveys to find out what the demand is. It mentions here examining potential models for deployment. So it could be that they're going to determine, all right, in this community, does the community do this themselves? Do they do a private partnership, public-private partnership with an existing provider? Maybe it's a local telephone company and the municipality and they get together, or maybe it's a local telephone company and a EMC, and they get together and share the infrastructure and come up with a public-private partnership to provide broadband. Maybe it's an open access network where the city decides we're just going to put in a network and then let any service provider that wants to come in and market the service over our infrastructure can do that. So there's different models that can take place there. Then it mentions technical planning consists mainly of network design, business planning, and if applicable, submission of applications for funding. So obviously the city can help with how the service providers or the communities can apply for the funds. They're going to need help with that, some technical planning there, or technical help. Maybe even network design. So that is or could be an issue, and it mentions here specifically many communities, especially rural and underserved ones, may not have the necessary expertise, staff, or financial resources, right? So you've got these small communities, they don't have a big government, and to set up their own little broadband kind of office within that government might be difficult. They can get a few people in there, but they're going to need some help with some of these technical kinds of things and other issues. They may not have the necessary expertise, staff, or financial resources. State programs that provide support for or lead planning efforts can help build the capacity and provide the resources that communities need to be successful. What do planning and capacity building contribute to broadband expansion efforts? So, it's always important to plan, to know where you're going to be going before you go there. So how does that help in broadband? A more active voice for community members, so it helps community members get their voice heard, I guess is what they're saying, in designing local broadband networks and negotiating public-private partnerships I was talking about there. Evidence for the private sector of a community's desire and willingness to pay for expanded service. So once again, if you were to do surveys of the community, find out how interested people are, what the demand is, then that's good evidence for the private sector to be able to come in and say, yeah, we'd like to get some of these funds so that we can build out, because it looks like there is good demand there. Clear funding priorities and project timelines for grant administrators, so it does help identify how long it's going to take to put this infrastructure in and what the goals are. An achievable outline for how a project will connect the entire community, not just the most profitable sections, to high quality and affordable internet at speeds that will be useful over the long term. So how do we best resolve the issue at hand, which is those communities that don't have access to good broadband right now? Not just go in these areas that are easy, right? So it's easy to provide broadband to areas that are easy, where you're going to get paid back pretty quickly. That's where we have broadband today. So how do we get to these other areas? A chance to define local priorities and objectives related to digital equity and economic development. So again, these are ways that stakeholders can get their voice heard. Opportunities to form partnerships and advance community goals, especially when funding is not available or secured. And then competitive grant program, when well designed, can correct the market failures that have left many people without access to high-speed, reliable internet. So again, the point is to get internet in those areas that they don't have it now for various reasons. What do well-designed competitive grant programs contribute to the broadband efforts? A set of evaluation criteria, such as demonstrated community support and economic need, matching funds from the applicant. So in the BEAD, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is part of the Infrastructure Act, there is a 25% matching fund requirement. But again, this is what this competitive grant program can do and should do. Demonstrate commitment from the applicants, help ensure efficient use of public funds, an emphasis on faster speeds, such as by requiring scalable, sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off there. There we go. Matching funds from the applicant, demonstrate commitment from the applicants and help ensure efficient use of public funds. An emphasis on faster speeds, requiring scalable technology. Ensure that funded projects can meet future usage needs. So that's been a big emphasis of the federal government, is trying to make sure that what we're going to put in is going to be future-proof as much as possible. So in other words, we don't put in broadband infrastructure, spend a lot of money, and it's something that's only going to be useful or have a usable life of, let's say, 5 years. So that's one of the reasons that they are emphasizing fiber if they can, because fiber has the ability, because of the media, the glass basically, and lasers and whatnot, that has the ability to grow into the future without having to change out a lot of infrastructure. Maybe you have to change out some lasers or something like that, but you still got the fiber in the ground that should continue to work. So that's a big emphasis. So that's what they're talking about here: scalable, ensuring that projects can meet future usage needs, alignment between community plans and applicants' proposals, ensuring that communities have assessed their options and gained resident and partner buy-in. Again, that's kind of from the survey aspect. Effective stewardship of public funds, very important to help ensure that funded proposals achieve their intended purpose. We want to make sure that the money that the government is spending, because that's our money, right? We're the ones paying taxes to the federal government, and that money is going to go to the state government. there's probably going to be some money in your state taxes eventually that are going to be going to help maintain this broadband office. So all of this is money that we're paying for, right? So we want to make sure as citizens that it's spent good, good stewardship of these public funds, and ensure that they're achieving the intended purpose. Again, that would be providing broadband to everybody in a kind of an equitable way, affordable way, and not to be spending money where it doesn't need to be spent. So if you've already got good broadband in an area, you've got multiple providers getting fast speeds, even one good provider, that should not be our first location that we go to. We should be going to locations that don't have good broadband. Those would be underserved and unserved areas. So the underserved being anything less than 100 by 20, unserved being anything less than 25 by 3, and there's still quite a few areas in the country that would qualify for those types of funds. Reduced costs of deployment in high-cost areas, greater availability of broadband connections, obviously, that's and what they're talking about there is, and progress towards secondary goals, actually, such as the use of networks to strengthen local economies. So greater availability of broadband connections is kind of your first goal. Get everybody up on good internet, hopefully 100 by 100 or better to start out with. A gig later, easily we can do this with certain technologies. But it mentions the secondary goal here, strengthening the local economy. So that's one of the things that keeps these communities down sometimes, is that people, when they move into a home or a business, obviously, they want access to really good internet because they need to be able to do business that way, whether that's remote learning, remote work, whether that's operating your business. Everybody needs a good broadband connection, and that can really make a big impact on economic development and attracting people to your area. So they just conclude here, research has shown that when state programs have a dedicated office, offer localities support for planning and capacity building, and provide competitive grant funding, they are more likely to have success in achieving state access goals. So that's what they're saying will work, and basically the conclusion here is that this is what all state broadband offices should be doing, because this has been proven to work, is having these things in place. So there you go. So if you are a state and you've got a broadband office, but you want to look at how maybe you can make it better, or maybe you don't have your office really or your program in place yet, this would be of great interest to you. If you're a broadband provider or community, I think hopefully also this was of interest if you are looking at getting funds and then providing internet in the community. So if it was helpful, I hope you give me a thumbs up on the video, and subscribe if you're not. Click the subscribe button, click the little bell, and then you will be notified. If you select all, you'll be notified anytime I'm live, and I'm live pretty much every day for broadband deployment news. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.